Okay. So here's one that goes in.
All right, let's hear it.
No meme here for the entire email, I promise.
That's a meme.
To the SBF crew, I heard you guys discussing Devil May Cry V, and you seem to be. This is from Pierce.
You.
Pierce.
Hey, Pierce.
So I heard you guys discussing Devil May Cry V, and you seem genuinely interested in a new game coming out and seem genuinely to love the series. The whole thing makes me confused, as you and others' excitement is so alien to my experience with the game. It's difficult to understand the appeal of the series, and I was wondering if you could perhaps read my experience and tell me what the appeal is to you.
Got it.
I bought the HD collection of Devil May Cry after finishing Bayo. I loved quote-unquote Bayo. I had such a good time with Bayo, finishing 3+ times. I wanted more. Heard lots of good things about Devil May Cry, and that it's the game that was made by the same people. I heard them praising the stylish, fun combat, interesting enemies, well-done gameplay, lighthearted and jokey tone, good music, and more. Boy, was I in for a shock. I spent $70 or so on the collection, and I consider it to be one of the worst game purchases decisions I've ever made. My experience with the game was pretty much the opposite of what was advertised. Instead of stylish, fun combat, it turned out the only real strategy was mashing attack button. I remember an uppercut, but there was no use for it. To be fair, I also found the shotgun in a dresser to replace the useless pistols, but it turned the game into repeatedly shoot them. The game didn't seem lighthearted or jokey at all. Instead, it all seemed rather dour, with complete moments of failing to be cool in there. Instead of interesting enemies, I got dumb, boring puppets for the most of the time I played.
The person's clearly just talking about DMC1.
Yes.
Yeah.
Instead of well-done gameplay, I got awful camera work and jumping way worse than it should have been. The real worst thing, however, was the music, the awful pipe organ massacre on eternal loop, the kind of physical punishment for playing the game at all. I got a literal headache from listening as I wandered around the castle. Compare that to Bayo, which has such a fun intro sequence, and immediately in the graveyard you have access to a full move set. I got to do a whole bunch of moves with each variation. I got to do cool, useful things, witch time and bullet climax, and the music is good, and the game, quote-unquote, keeps being fun continuously. Onwards to HD Collection, driven by the talk of how good the series is, $70, and I paid for the 3 games. Eventually, I reached the spider that was on fire. I fought it for a bit and decided that it wasn't making the game better, and that it would never get better. So I pretty much, I eventually passed the game on to someone else through eBay. Monkey Paw style. So what exactly do you guys like about Devil May Cry, both the first game in particular and the series as a whole?
All right. Well,
what got this game 3 sequels and a remake?
I'm going to say right off the bat, before you guys probably go more depth than me, it's like, it's not great compared to Bayo, because Bayo's much newer, has more systems, and is more fun. Generally.
This is a very understandable situation.
If you go from Bayo, but this person has to understand that we grew up playing Devil May Cry.
I can follow the timeline that leads to this.
So
I understand.
I want to point out that this is a very similar complaint that you see a lot of the time when you go from the spin-off, the spiritual successor game that's far into the future, and then you go back to pretty much where it started, and it's like there is a specific personality trait of your tolerance for shit being old. And Devil May Cry 1 is positively fucking ancient at this point. It came out in 2001.
Yeah.
It is old as shit. Bayonetta is now old as shit, but that genre hasn't really advanced all that far past Bayonetta.
Yeah.
A lot of the design decisions made during Bayonetta were specifically to combat the issues that you describe. Jumping in DMC1 in particular is really bad. The way that you dodge, holding the way that you dodge in that game was even called out in the leak for V as something that's awkward and needed to change.
Yeah, it needed to be more
DMC1 is now old enough to drink. I think that in particular,
in Canada,
when you think of
20, it's not 21.
Oh God, it's fucking 21 shit. What the fuck?
Right.
Anyway,
it's only 16, so you'd have to go to
DMC1 in particular. Besides remembering that it's like the time and such and the context.
Yeah.
This was a game that when you first played it, you're coming off of it being like it's a Capcom game and it's like, it's like Resident Evil. So your expectations were Resident Evil.
And it used to be
a
Resident
little bit
Evil.
faster, right?
Yeah.
Because that's originally what it was. So with that in mind and kind of like setting your expectations there, what you got was something way faster and more exciting than Resident Evil, and the tone is definitely dour compared to Bayo now.
Or DMC3 later.
But DMC1 compared to RE is lively and fun,
And
because you've got
junky.
a jumping around character going flock off Featherface, or you can stick around and find out the hard way, was something that you wouldn't get from Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine.
Not intentionally.
you also have to compare it to the state of the 3D action game at the time. God of War was quality, but that came later.
Yeah, it came out like 4
Right?
years
like
later.
compare that to like Lament of Innocence, which was the Devil May Cry knockoff that Konami made, which is a Castlevania game, and every 3D action game in the PS1 era. Like, it was a quantum leap forward in like control, in move list, in style. So, for example, you found an uppercut, but you didn't find a reason to use it. That's because the primary reason to use it in Devil May Cry 1 is to pop up an enemy so it can't hurt you, shoot it, so that it looks cool. Like, that's the number one reason to use the uppercut, is because it looks dope.
Here's the other thing. This is a game that came out on the PS2, but let's not forget that the PS2 was a fucking long generation. This was early PS2, not launch.
One of the earliest.
But almost launch season.
Like PS2 is still getting notable releases like in 2006.
When it came, because I played it as one of the games that, like, first time I touched the PS2 was at Microplay when you'd rent, and I remember like picking out DMC because it was like, oh yeah, it's one of those new games for this new console.
DMC1 was the first game I ever like rented as soon as I got my PS2. Like, I spent all my money so I couldn't buy a game, so I went to the store and I rented DMC1.
So what DMC1 effectively represents is the break off of a different franchise that was its holder, in the same way that Dota broke off from Warcraft, right? In the same way that Counter-Strike broke off
From Half-Life.
Like, you're seeing the first step of basically a mod. DMC1 was effectively an RE mod.
An RE4 mod.
Right?
A repurposed Resident Evil game. Basically.
And the expectations going in were not for this new thing that you now know as a song, as a solid type of genre, but it was a genre that didn't exist at the time.
So, like, I mean, we all came to it from different places. Like, the place that Matt and I came at that series is wildly different from the one that Wooly came from it. Me and Matt are big old school Resident Evil fans. So you look at Devil May Cry and you look, oh, it's got Dino Crisis style 3D environments, but it's still fixed camera, and there's a lot of interactables that you can read, like in Resident Evil, and it's a really gothic, like, oppressive, like, environment. But it's a lot. It's turning into the goofy stuff that Resident Evil does.
Yeah.
But it also has really solid action combat, and it starts the stylish action category of presentation and cutscenes.
But they were fixing the car as it was rolling, because they didn't know what they invented, right? And this is, and to Pierce, to like actually address what you're talking about, the fact that DMC2 is such a train wreck,
it's the worst,
shows you how much they didn't know what they had, right? They really didn't know. Like, people were upset because guns usually do damage, but these guns don't. Why?
In this game, guns are combo filler.
It doesn't make sense why my guns are not hurting things, because bang, bang, gun.
Yeah.
And the idea of thinking outside the box of them being like, no, exactly, these are combo filler. They're meant to stall you while in the air while I do other things.
And keep your combo.
There was no precedent for that. There's no reason to think that way, and it was not explicitly explained in any menu. It was just something that was emergent with how the game worked out. So all this to say is that in your HD collection, if you happened to make it over to 3
is a lot closer to what you are used to.
But you would see the actual first steps of, we know what we're making now, right? We fully understand and embrace, like, the wackiness, the craziness, the combo, the style, the fun.
And it's all iterative, right? So 3 has, what's his name? Shimomura. Doing the cutscenes.
Yeah, so
right?
the cutscenes are
and the cutscenes,
over the top.
Shimomura did Bayo 1's cutscenes, he did DMC4's cutscenes, and he's probably going to do DMC5's cutscenes, right? That tone becomes established, right? In addition, DMC1's dodging is terrible. DMC2's dodging is even worse. DMC3 has a style which introduces Bayonetta-style invincible dodges in Trickster.
Right.
But it's a specific style button. Bayonetta looks at that and then goes, no, let's make that universal and put it on a trigger, and then let's give people a bonus for using it
perfectly. And exactly.
It's a very iterative process.
I would still say that maybe even still, like, judging from that email, it was pretty harsh on about everything. Probably better if you ever want to try it against, actually just start at DMC4 if you're so into Bayonetta.
I agree.
Like, even 3
Why
might
not
be
3?
A little, because I think the generation gap might be a problem with this. With what Phil what was it? Anyway,
Pierce.
Pierce. I think the generation gap might be a little bit like it might be better to go DMC4 than if you like that, maybe then dip back into DMC3 just a bit.
There is also he's talking a lot about Bayo, and it's a really good, easy comparison point. Bayonetta is not made by the same people who made the Devil May Cry 100% series.
At least.
Bayonetta is made by the people who made DMC1. And 3 and 4 are made by Itsuno-san and those folks, and I'm not even going to talk about 2. Fuck that game.
But there was a collective...
There is a split.
There's a split, but there and you see that whenever poor Kamiya has to answer questions about modern Dante.
Yeah.
But alongside that split was a collective understanding of what a character action game was.
And Bayo and DMC do aim towards different directions. Bayonetta is a lot more freeform, I would say, and it's a lot more like flow based because of the way dodging works. Whereas Devil May Cry, when it hit 3 and 4, like the specific draw to many people, it becomes a combo machine. It becomes a training mode simulator on helpless enemies that you can do a billion. You can do a lot more in 4 than you could ever do in Bayo, and that's not a knock against Bayo. It's just the focuses of those games are different.
Plus, you also have multiple.
Like the nonsense that Virgil can get up to in the special edition is totally ridiculous.
So I was going to say 3 special edition. I don't know if it's so old that it's like you can't go back to it.
I can, and some people can, but I just from that harsh that email was on DMC1.
1 is now like unrecognizable as the start of that genre.
Sure,
and it's gone so far.
But the point is, I guess it comes from like who it depends on who you are and what you're looking for and how much you're willing to put up with, I suppose. Because I know some people that like would want to get into it that'd be like, fuck yeah, I'll start with 1. I don't know what this wonky shit is, but they'll enjoy that wonky ride for what it was and go like, oh man, that's how it used to be. Now I understand, So some people have more patience with that than others. But if you didn't know what you were in for, then yeah, you wouldn't have known that the third game is kind of where you'd start to see a lot more of your Bayo influence.
It reminds me a lot of people who, and this is slightly different, but it's like people who go back, they hear FF7 is the greatest RPG PlayStation, and they go back like,
and they go, that's it
now,
yeah,
and they go, what's the big deal?
Exactly.
These cutscenes look terrible. I'm like, no, I mean, the context of the time.
Thankfully, I haven't ran into many of those people, but I can imagine that because a lot of things get overrated based on inflation over time of hype, But no, so I mean, to this person that like, and I could imagine them also being excited for games like Revengeance, you know what I mean, and those things because you're seeing the realized full version of the idea.
Yeah. So V, if it's real, and when it comes out, it will. Is probably going to be way more up your alley than these older ones because they're going to be building off the lessons that they saw in Bayonetta and Bayonetta 2.
And effectively, to answer your question, the reason why we're excited and into the series is because of all the shit that you didn't do, which is the third game and beyond.
Yeah, the third and fourth game. Like, I personally
and also because it's been so long since
I personally
we had
would love... Like, there's an alternate version of history in which DMC1 became the long-running template of that series, and I'd be perfectly happy because I really like that mixture.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm happier with this one, where it became a single-player fighting game.
If Kamiya gets his wish, he's going to go back to DMC1, Dante, because that's what he's got in his head. But, I mean, at the end of the day, like, we're looking at DMC5 probably being... all the things you love about Bayo and all the things you love about Revengeance and all the things you love about DMC4 and so on getting incorporated into this new version because now we know more about this genre than ever, right? To the point where...
Even Dragon's Dogma had lessons to teach, and that's barely touching it.
And the Pretenders to the Throne are now pretty decent games.
Yeah.
Right?
The knockoffs and reboots
are coming along quite well.
Decent.
So
at worst.
You know, like everything stands to reason that this is going to be phenomenal. But all that quality was in the games that you didn't play.
And also there's stuff in Devil May Cry 1 that never came back that I miss.
Like
perfect shots that kill enemies in a single hit.
Fucking thank you. When you get the scissor fucks and they're coming at you and you wait and line up the shotgun and get a headshot, and they die in one.
You know you can do it with the pistol, right?
Totally.
It does. It's not a damage thing. It is
one of the coolest things in the entire franchise, and it never came back.
Yeah, and it's only for that one enemy.
Holy fuck! I loved it so much.
Yeah. It's harder to do with the pistol because the aiming, but it's you get the clash and it has to be to the right side, and you walk 2 feet to the left, and you put the gun on their forehead, and you pop, and you just
when
pop.
The shots lined up, they fucking and they're such an annoying enemy to fight. So a really pain-free way of dealing with them with style was so welcome. That was great. Really good example. Yeah, absolutely.
Also, I have one last thing. He mentions fighting Phantom, the lava spider.
Yeah.
One of the things about Phantom that I remember blew people's fucking minds was that you can hit his projectile
reflect it back into his open mouth. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's not a big deal anymore,
no.
Obviously.
But if you were frame perfect, or let's say like 3 or 4 frame perfect.
Right, you could do it, and it felt awesome.
Yeah.
Like, the camera in that fight's not the best, and, he's not, but, like, that
hidden
there's
bits.
Cool stuff there.
Little hidden bits.
Like, later DMC4 made it so that it's like, no, I'm going to grab this fucking spear out of the air and throw it back. Even cooler with Nero.
I'm biking down the fucking tower, and yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty much it, man.
I think that was answered.
I'd say so.
The context of the period is vital.
But again, it's very understandable that someone with zero information walks in and goes, "What is this?"
But also, I'm not going to stand here and go like, "Oh, we're perfect and we can do that." Like, I can't go back to things past a certain date. I can't go back to things before I started playing games.
Well, that's what
I can't go back to the Atari and appreciate any of that shit.
Well, Pat, you were able to watch 0079 and not have a problem with it.
That's right.
But not everyone can do that. Which is why I have a hard time saying, "Oh yeah, start at 79," because I'm like, I understand that some people don't, and I don't know what I have to know.
There are people that are going to, this animation sucks.
I have to know if you're the type of person that is willing to sit through dated shit to and appreciate, and you're able to go like, I can put my mind in a place where I know what this was at the time, therefore this is like good for its place.
Think about it this way: like, there are people out there that like younger folks or people that didn't get into animated movies until later, who are used to the modern state of animation, and if you were to go show them like a Miyazaki film or like an older Disney film, go, why does this animation look so old? Why does it look so bad?
No, here's the worst one. I know I have I think they're like, I don't know, 16, 17 or whatever. The son of a friend or whatever was talking about, I think, Force Awakens. They're like, man, I hate those fake looking costumes that the aliens wear. They don't people that don't like going back to practical effects, don't like puppets, don't like miniatures. That's where I'm like,
punch them.
Don't get me wrong, CG is CG and it needs to be here.
Yeah.
But if someone makes that choice to go, I want a monster that looks real, and do we have a cool thing like those little frost foxes that are in The Last Jedi? In most shots, they're CG, but they made a practical model that looks amazing, and they use that for close-ups or whatever. And I'm like, someone that's like can't go back to fucking practical effects.
I've got
crazy.
But bad CG though,
I don't know,
is so much worse than bad practical effects.
Bad CG is absolutely worse.
I don't know if you guys actually know this. Matt might, but you know the Thing sequel, the one that takes place on the Norwegian base that came out a few years ago.
I've seen it.
That was all CG effects, much to the disappointment of fans of the original, right? Are you aware that the entire movie was shot and filmed using practical effects? And then the producers or executives in charge of the project said, the testing says that young people like the CG look, and it'll do better with the CG look. And they replaced the entire film's practical effects with CG.
The testing was so bad that they spent that much money on
correct.
Completely re-releasing it.
Like, and there's behind the scenes things if you can see, like the double combined man.
It's fucked.
Where it's a practical rig and it looks so good.
That's a shame, because that movie in its finished state is actually fine. It's a decent thing, you know? Is it as good as... No, of course not.
No.
But I was actually surprised, well, this wasn't that bad. I enjoyed it, I guess.
But
the fact that I missed out on that...
Yeah, the fact that was an economical decision that was like...
No, the kids like the CG.
Yeah, and they're like, and it's worth it for us to actually go back and spend on it. Like, it's fucked.
That's crazy.
There's no winning this. You know?
Go look that stuff up. The practical effects they made. I can't.
awesome.
And there's interviews with guys who like
Wow.
made the rig, and they're like all about to cry because they're like, yeah, it all got taken out.
That's super depressing, and the fact that like the people involved in making it, like even the production level, are like, you know, you're telling me that the producers were saying, yeah, we know it sucks, but
Busted 6 months of my life to make this fucking rig, and the test shoots were great. And they okay,
That's why I'm glad in Predator movies they always have some asshole running around in his cool suit.
yeah, because it's a human shaped.
But
you know what, Matt? If someone told me they were gonna put in a practical effects Cathaga into the relic, I would say, "Fuck you!
No,
Get out of my
I want
house!
that dank bad CG.
Get
where
the fuck out of my
it's in the
house!"
darkness, but they haven't quite been able to light CG monsters that well, so it always stands out and it's gray.
He's gray. His shadows are gray.
It's all terrible.
I would
Those
not
shadows.
accept it.
There's certain exceptions to the rule. Yeah.
Don't you dare!
Don't you dare take away my bad CG Cathaga from me.
Oh, there was one last thing that I forgot to mention about Devil May Cry that adds into it that would
Okay.
hurt a person's enjoyment of it now. When it came out, it wasn't just a great action game. It was a great action game that was hard as shit and had tons of variable difficulty modes that you would unlock later. So a lot of the depth in that game
DMD
got
all that
discovered
stuff.
as a result of I remember me and you had an argument over whether you preferred like Kick 13 or the Meteor on Ifrit for like Nightmare's Core.
Right.
And it's like, well, Kick 13's faster, and it kicks away the fucking the triangle projectiles that go towards you, but the Meteor actually does do more damage over time. It's like all that stuff isn't visible on a casual play, and the game's difficulty with its like more obtuse mechanics as of now make it worse overall.
And people put the same level of scrutiny into this that they do into like really competitive FPSs or really competitive fighting games or really competitive other types of multiplayer games, and you end up finding really obscure things, you know? And there's like secrets, like things that go from one-shot kills on certain enemies and, knocking back Phantom's fireball turn into plug-in controller 2 during whatchamacallit,
Arkham.
and you get a second player controlling Virgil on that boss fight.
And then you have the people who go on the real deep dive and they find out, hey, how many times can you jump cancel Killer B? Oh, infinite times? Okay, let's see if we can defeat Beowulf with just Killer B. You totally can, and shit like that.
And also, if you stay on Doppelganger, that your Doppelganger can also be controlled by player 2 the entire time. So, you know what I mean? Like little things like that where you're like, what the fuck? That's in the game? Like, there's super
Can we
like
please get a co-op mode in the new Devil May Cry?
only if you don't split the
You
screen.
got a co-op mode in Bayonetta 2.
Only if you don't split the screen.
maybe
And it functions better than you think it does.
Yeah, you've always been on about that.
I really expected it to be shit, and it wasn't. Okay, let's take one last one from Bailey. He says...